So the Board of Alders, based on a public hearing in the Legislation Committee last year, which I chair, convened a task force at Alder Morrison's suggestion to address issues surrounding minority contractors in the city of New Haven. Simply put, those of us on the board have heard consistently from Latinx and especially from Black contractors that they don't feel that they have enough opportunity in the city. I'm going to let my colleague Alder Morrison say a little bit more about where we're coming from in a moment. But the agenda for tonight's town hall, after Alder Morrison speaks, I'm going to introduce Doctors Fred McKinney and Gerald Janes, and we'll hear a presentation from them. They've spent the past several months digging into data and conducting interviews and meetings to address this important topic. And like I said, I'll give a more formal introduction of these gentlemen momentarily. After their presentation, first we'll give any members of this task force an opportunity to share their thoughts on what we've heard tonight. Next, we'll give any members of the Board of Alders who are in attendance an opportunity to share their thoughts if they so choose. And then finally, and most importantly, we'll give members of the public here, including contractors, including community members, a chance to be heard. And I'm going to give ground rules and the process for the members of the public when we get to that part of the agenda. The short answer is that you will use the raise hand function in your Zoom, and we'll bring you in one at a time, which is the way that the Board of Alders has been conducting public hearings since this pandemic and since we've had to move our work to be virtual and remote. But I'll remind folks and give a little explainer of how to do that when it's time. And so it's vitally important for us to hear from the public on this task force because, whether those of us on the Board of Alders on the task force or those of us who are in the administration, it's our job to take, what we hear today and what the task force has heard over the past several months. It's our job to turn that into concrete action over the coming weeks and months. So I'm now going to turn it over to Alder Morrison for some brief remarks, and then I will introduce Doctors McKinney and Janes.
Thank you, Alder Decker. Before I get into, how we got here, I first have to thank you, Alder, for your stellar job in leading us in this process to dig deep down into a problem that we all in our communities have been feeling as minority contractors and laborers. I want to thank this task force, for consultants. And I also want to thank the Dixville construction contractor professionals for highlighting this issue. The way that we got here is because the community made a cry. The community required the city to right a wrong. There are laws in place that surround the profession of construction and public funding and residents and things of that sort. And for years and years and years, people of color and women have been getting the short end of the stick, specifically Black people. And so when the Q House project came online, everyone was so excited because we all knew that this was going to be the one opportunity Black people, people of color, would have the opportunity to eat and to be a part of history. And when this process started in the bidding and the hiring and things of that sort, and again, Black people, people of color saw themselves on the sideline, the cry began and it was heard. I thank, again, the construction professionals in the Dixville community. I thank Ron Castillo from WYBC. I thank the New Haven Independent, and I thank the members of the Q House Advisory Board for pushing this effort, for insisting that the city made an effort to see what is going on as far as our minority contractors are concerned. So because of that, we're here tonight to find out why people of color are getting very minimal dollars when it comes to projects. The QOS project, one of the things that project did was to push the extent of the law, 12 and a half, 12 and a quarter. And our esteemed consultants tonight will take us through a process, a roadmap in regards to where we are and where we're trying to get. So again, I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank, again, this esteemed task force, the city, for sticking in with this. And I am so excited about the information we're going to hear tonight. So thank you, Alder Decker, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. I would like to also, as we get going here, recognize a few of our colleagues who I see in the audience. I see Alder Honda Smith, I see Alder Rosa Ferraro Santana, and I see Alder Stephen Winter. So just as a reminder, after the presentation, I'm going to give members of this committee a chance to make a comment if, this task force, pardon me, a chance to make comment if they so choose, and then I will give our colleagues from the board a chance to give their comments if they so choose, and then we will open it up to the public. Since I saw a couple of people asking in the chat, when you get called in, when it's your turn to testify and you get called on, you'll be brought onto the screen, and your video will be there, and we will see your face, so you will not be, shouting at us from the void, or anything like that. I think before I introduce Doctors McKinney and Janes, actually, let me let the other members of this task force who are here with us so far tonight just briefly introduce themselves. Starting with Will Snyder, who is on mute.
Good evening. I'm Lil Snyder, Program Manager of the Small Contractor Development Program for the City of New Haven.
Thanks, Lil. Shafiq.
Yes, Shafiq Abdul-Sabar, owner of Echo Urban Pioneers, New Haven resident.
Great. Thanks, Shafiq. Giovanni.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Giovanni Zinn. I'm the city engineer. Thank you for having me here tonight.
And Angel.
This is hi, I'm Angel Fernandez Chavero, and I run the Commission on Equal Opportunities.
Great. Welcome all. So I'm going to introduce now our presenter. I'm not going to put myself on mute. I'm just going to pull up my notes very quickly so that I can give that introduction. So, over the past months, this task force has been meeting. We've been very fortunate to be able to consult with this firm, BJM Solutions, and these gentlemen. So I'm just going to introduce first Fred W. McKinney, Dr. Fred, as we know him on the committee and in the city. So Dr. Fred McKinney is the Carlton Highsmith Chair for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Lunder School of Business at Quinnipiac University. Additionally, he is the director of the People's United Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Dr. McKinney received his PhD in economics from Yale University in 1983, although we won't hold that against him. I was in the political science PhD program there, but his PhD is in economics and his BA degree in economics from the University of California at Los Angeles. Dr. McKinney worked as the managing director for the minority business programs at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth from 2015 to 2018. He was the president and CEO of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. He was assistant professor at the University of Connecticut School of Business and the assistant professor at Brandeis University Heller School. In addition, Dr. McKinney was a graduate assistant at the White House Council of Economic Advisors from 78 to 79 and the RAND corporations. Dr. McKinney owned and operated several successful ventures in the coffee industry, and Dr. McKinney has been honored by numerous organizations. Notably, in 2017, the United States Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency presented Dr. McKinney with its highest award, the Ronald H. Brown Leadership Award. A prolific writer, Dr. McKinney has authored 4 books and over 60 articles on minority business development and corporate supplier diversity. Dr. McKinney has served on many boards of directors, including the Yale New Haven Health System Bridgeport Hospital, the Gateway Community College Foundation, Bridgeport Habitat for Humanity, the Forum for World Affairs, the Communities Bank of Bridgeport, Empower Yourself, and the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston's Community Advisory Board. So welcome, Dr. Fred. And our second expert presenter is Professor Gerald Jaynes. So Gerald Jaynes is a professor at Yale University in the Department of Economics and is acting chair of the African American Studies Department. Professor Jaynes earned the doctorate in economics from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana in 1976. In addition to his teaching and research duties as a professor at Yale, he has served as a legislative aide to State Senator Cecil A. Party, the president pro tem of the Illinois State Senate from 71 to 72. He was also assistant professor of economics at the University of Pennsylvania before coming to Yale, and chaired Yale's Department of African and African American Studies from 1990 to 96, and then again from 2018 to 2019. Dr. Jaynes has served in many public capacities, such as study director of the Committee on the Status of Black Americans at the National Research Council of the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C., the chairman of the New Haven, Connecticut Minority Business Development Agency by mayoral appointment. He was on the mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee for the Redevelopment of New Haven in 1990, member board of economists for Black Enterprise Magazine, fellow at the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, member of the Council of Economic Advisors to the National Urban League. Dr. Jaynes has testified before the United States Congress on numerous occasions and has served as a consultant to federal and local government agencies. He is recognized as an expert on race relations and the economic conditions of African Americans, and has lectured and spoken on these topics at many universities and forums, including the United States Supreme Court. Dr. Jaynes' research has appeared on radio and television shows, including The Bill Moyers Show and the NBC Today Show. Listed in the Who's Who among African Americans since 1989, he has written extensively for scholarly journals, books, and popular essays. Among his more notable publications are A Common Destiny, Blacks in the American South from 1999, Branches Without Roots, Genesis of the Black Working Class in the American South in 1986, Immigration and Race, New Challenges for American Democracy in 2000, and the Encyclopedia of African American Society, 2004. So welcome, Dr. Jaynes, and I will let you gentlemen take it away.
Thank you, Alder Decker and Alder Morrison and task force members. And we have another member of our team, Barry Wade, who's here with us. And Barry's going to be driving the presentation. So if he has the rights to show, we can begin. So today, what our plan is to go through our analysis of 12.25 and 12.5. We're going to start with some basic findings and recommendations. We'll do that for both of the ordinances, 12.25 and 12.5. We'll start actually with 12.5. We'll review the data that we had available and what the data tells us. And then after we've reviewed the data and our findings, we will share with you what our preliminary recommendations are to improve 12.25 and 12.5. And so with that, we can go to the next slide. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Jaynes.
Okay, thank you. And good evening to everyone. We first want to just tell you fairly clearly what it is that we did that enabled us to get to the findings and recommendations that we're going to share with you this evening. First, we studied the ordinances and their legislative history, and also the legal history that underpins the foundations of the two ordinances. After we felt comfortable with that, we held a virtual town hall on September 29 last year to hear the perspectives of various stakeholders interested in the ongoing performance of the two ordinances. In addition to the town hall, we then interviewed other stakeholders, including city employees, small and minority business owners, community leaders, union leaders, and owners of large non-minority construction firms. We also analyzed available data describing minority business, women's business, and small business contractor utilization and minority and women employment utilization on City of New Haven funded construction projects. In addition to that, we had multiple meetings with the New Haven Task Force and their members. So basically, that is the methodology that we underwent to get to the findings and recommendations that I'm about to start sharing with you. Next, please. Okay, so we'll begin with ordinance 12.5. Next. And the graph that you see before you is a telling us a story about the employment. So it's giving us for 2017 and 2018, which is the latest available data, the proportion of construction jobs in New Haven County by race, ethnicity, and sex. And the important components of this is it tells us a story that if essentially we see that in particular Black Americans with respect to their population percentage in the county are very underrepresented. They have about half their population percentage of the jobs during that 1 year period. The first pair of bars shows us that white workers in New Haven County were overrepresented, while they were about 64% rounding off of the population of the county. They had about 78% of the construction jobs. Hispanic workers were roughly about where you would expect them to be. If we just use those population percentages, we would say that they were slightly underrepresented, but we wanted to be very clear about what these data represent. The Latinx population is a little younger than the rest of the population of the New Haven County, and as a consequence, we wouldn't expect a representative share to exactly match that 17%. But if you were trying to hone down on this much more, our conclusion is that the proportion of jobs going to Latinx workers in New Haven County construction jobs is about where you would expect to find them overall. Now, what does that actually tell us? Well, if we look, we see that women represent about 15% of the jobs. It is very difficult for, I hope, what would be somewhat obvious reasons to make an assessment as to whether that is underrepresented by a lot, about where you would expect it to be or not. Our position is that it's somewhat lower than we would expect it to be, but being really precise on those kinds of numbers, that number is difficult to do. Overall, then, what we find is that the takeaway from this is that white men in particular are overrepresented in construction jobs in New Haven County. Now, why New Haven County? What could we say about New Haven City? Well, it's going to be a theme tonight. We're going to talk about, among our important findings, is that the city needs to do a better job with maintaining data in a form that is going to be easily accessible to the city workers who are responsible for enforcing ordinances 12.25 and 12.5, as well as anyone from the outside, such as a BJM Solutions that might come in attempting to advise the city on how they're doing with respect to the performance of those ordinances. So one of the things that we found was that it was not really possible for us to ascertain to any degree of strong accuracy what job utilization rates for these various groups were if we only looked at construction jobs within the city of New Haven. Now, I'll add to that two things. One, the overall county data is going to be very close to what we find if we only looked at New Haven, because New Haven is going to be the big driver of most of construction employment in the county first of all. And then secondly, older data that looks not at New Haven only, but at the New Haven PMSA, or metropolitan area, which is a which is a smaller part of the county, is not that different from what we're finding from this county data, but it's older data, so I didn't want to present it tonight. So the takeaway then is that complaints that are being made with respect to underemployment of minorities, and particularly Blacks, possibly women, if we thought since Blacks are being underemployed in construction jobs, probably women are too, because Black women are not likely getting a share that we would expect them to get, that those complaints seem to have validity on the basis of the data that's available to us. Next slide. So what we would like to do is recommend that the city consider, the Board of Alders consider some changes in the operation of Ordinance 12 1/2 that we think would go a long way towards increasing employment among minorities and women in the construction industry in the New Haven County and in New Haven specifically. And the large component of that, the most important one, we advise that the city consider enacting a bid price preference given to the bids of all firms who demonstrate a continuing commitment to meet the employment goals of Ordinance 12 1/2. This would take, under our the way we look at it as being best done, it would have two components. There would be a bid price preference equal to 5% given to the bid of any construction firm whose submitted bid contains a written pledge to meet the employment goals of Ordinance 12 1/2. Now, what does the bid price preference mean? It means, say, for example, that a firm that in fact made this written pledge came in second as the lowest responsible bidder for a contract. But the firm that came in as the lowest responsible bidder did not have a written pledge. Then the second bidder, as long as their price were within 5% of the lowest bidder, would be awarded the contract on the basis of this written pledge, which we would then presume the city would be enforcing. And we would expect that to be an incentive for all future construction contractors bidding to go to greater efforts to employ the underrepresented groups in the city of New Haven. Secondly, however, we would give an even larger bid preference of the same kind to a firm who, one, met the same written pledge, that is, it pledged in a written way that on the current contract, it is going to meet or exceed the goals of Ordinance 12 1/2. But as importantly, on the last contract that firm performed for the city, it actually did meet the goals of Ordinance 12 1/2. So there's a promise and a past performance component, which would give a 10% bid preference. Now, bid preferences of this kind are quite common, not of this particular kind for employment, but bid preferences for all kinds of things relating to the economy of a city, county, or even a state's are very common. So this stands on very solid grounds to meet any kinds of court challenges and things like that. So that's really our major recommendation as to how the city might in the near future, hopefully, begin to take some actions to move in a more positive direction to decrease the underutilization of minority workers and women in the construction industry. Next slide. Next slide.
Yeah, so on an employment and training skills and development for the 12 and a half, we found that the city of New Haven can and should do better on this front. And they can do that by bringing the major stakeholders together, by brokering an agreement between the construction unions, the major construction companies, and the city to significantly increase the number of New Haven resident apprentices that are underrepresented in the trades. And we talked to a number of stakeholders in New Haven about this. And one suggestion that we heard from one of the trade unions was a policy that, if it had been in place, would have resulted in more participation by minority workers on the Q House project, for example. And the specifics of that program was that for every 5 journeyman jobs, an apprentice would be brought in, and that apprentice would have to be from New Haven, from one of the targeted groups. But that requires an agreement between the city, the unions, and the organizations that help to train these folks. The focus of the connections with the union should be with the trades throughout the distribution of jobs. So it should not be just entry-level jobs or just high-paying jobs. It really needs to be throughout the whole spectrum of workers in the construction trades. Secondly, the city should implement a minority construction worker mentoring program in conjunction with the unions to support new workers in the trades. And so this industry, these trades, you know, when there's work to be done, there's work, but this is not a regular type of job that many people not in construction come to understand about their work. And so there is an opportunity here, particularly during the slow periods where local workers, New Haven residents that are participating in these programs can be mentored by more senior workers to prepare them for their careers in construction trades. And finally, on this slide, the city of New Haven should work with surrounding municipalities and possibly other cities in the state to launch a pre-construction education program for high school students. So we need a pipeline in New Haven. The challenge is are there enough jobs in New Haven to justify a training program for construction workers? And we think that while there may not be enough jobs in New Haven, there certainly are enough jobs in the county. And if you think about the programs that we're talking about, particularly when we get to program ordinance 12 and a quarter, it is a New Haven County market that determines that program. So we think that there are some reasons why the surrounding towns to New Haven might be incentivized to participate in a training program of their own residents, and they could all kick in some funds to make this a reality. But we think that this is a regional problem, not just simply a New Haven problem. And to solve this problem, we need to solve it regionally. And the other advantage of that is that there are jobs on projects outside of the city of New Haven. And if you regionalize the training, you might have the opportunity to better take advantage of the opportunities that exist outside of the city of New Haven for city of New Haven residents. So next slide, please.
I mentioned this, so we won't dwell on it, because I think that Dr. Fred is going to come back to it towards the end of the presentation. But as I had already said, enforcement of the existing ordinance 12 and a half is importantly connected to having transparent public communication of the procedures used to enforce. And even more importantly, the procedures and resources needed to systematically collect data and have it available for those who are in charge of enforcement of the ordinance has to be done. So we think that the city needs to upgrade its data collection and enforcement aspects. And then finally for this, the city needs greater enforcement of the existing sanctions on firms that are not in compliance with Ordinance 12 1/2. And just one thing about that, we carefully studied the ordinances, and it is clear that they were written in a very professional, thorough manner by people who understood what the problems in the construction industry are. And we don't see that there is a great need for changing much of the ordinances, with the obvious exceptions of the recommendations we're making tonight. Next slide.
So now we're going to shift our focus to 12 1/4. Next slide. And so what we did on 12 1/4 is we looked at total spending in construction in New Haven over the 4 years, 2016 to 2019. And so this first slide, we're going to have several cuts at this data to give you a picture of what's going on in this construction market, the construction spending market. And so you see here, we see that in over the period, it was about $137 million over the 4-year period, about $137 million spent on city-funded construction projects. So it's important to understand there's a lot of construction money taking place going on in New Haven. Not all of that money is subject to the New Haven small construction development program. And so we're focusing on the monies that are subject to the SCD program only. And so out of that 137 million, you see that 11.37% of that went to all MBEs. And that was MBEs whether they were in the SCD program or not, and 7.1% went to WBEs. Okay, next slide. Then we took a look at total New Haven spending. And again, this is money that was spent with New Haven firms. And so a little bit less than 70 million was spent with New Haven firms. And again, that's 70 million out of that previous 137 million. And then we looked at, okay, well, who got that money? And we see that 19.24% of the money spent with New Haven-based firms went to New Haven-based MBEs, and 12.4% went to New Haven-based WBEs. And so again, on this slide, what we're looking at is, again, the distribution of spend of these dollars. Next slide, please. So then we drill down even further to look at spending with SCD firms. So these would be firms, and we were told there are about 120 firms in the New Haven SCD program over this 4-year period. And so a little bit less than $35 million over that 4-year period was spent with SCD firms. Now, it's important to understand that the SCD program, as I said earlier, is a county-based program. So a firm can be eligible to participate in the SCD program, even if they are located outside of the city of New Haven, but are within the county of New Haven. And they meet certain requirements or restrictions on their income. So this is a look at the total SCD spending over the 4-year period. And you see that 86% of SCD spending did in fact go to New Haven-based SCD firms. So New Haven-based firms in the SCD programs are winning the lion's share of those SCD contracts. Then if you look at the who wins within that category, we see that 26.3% of SCD spending went to MBEs who are in the SCD program. Again, the SCD program is not a racial, ethnic, or gender program. So you don't have to be Black or Hispanic or a woman-owned business to qualify for SCD certification. But 26.3% of firms were MBEs in the program, and 10.7% of firms were women-owned firms in the program. So again, this gives us some indication of what's going on. Next slide, please. So another perspective that we thought was helpful to try to understand what's going on in this market in 12 1/4 is to look at some categories over time. And so we've got 4 years of data. Those are the 4 blocks of bars that you see. And what this is really illustrating is if you look at 2016, the blue bars, just look at the blue bars first. And so you see from 2016, there was a little bit of dip in total construction spending in New Haven from 2016 to 2017. There was a further dip from 2017 to 2018. And then there was a significant increase from 2018 to 2019. And we understand why that was. There were 3 major projects that were funded that took effect in 2019 in the city of New Haven. But look at the other bars to kind of indicate what's going on here. And the bar next to the blue bar is total SCD spending. And so you see it fluctuates pretty dramatically. In 2016, it's 11%. In 2017, it is 43%. So it more than triples. 2018, it's about the same. But then in 2019, while the total amount of spending is about the same as it was in 2018, in 2019, the percentage declines to 19%. So what that says is that that's where people are feeling some of the stress of not seeing the opportunities. They may see the work going on in the city, but they don't see any increase in the number of SCD firms participating in that work. The gray bar next to that is the New Haven numbers, and those numbers also fluctuate pretty dramatically. But look at what happens in the gray in 2019 compared to 2018 when you compare the New Haven-based firms with the total SCD firms. So in 2018 to 2019, while total SCD spending went down from 47% to 19%, New Haven spending actually went up, okay, dramatically in real terms, but in terms of percentages, it was still proportional. So they maintained their share. The next bar to that is SCD New Haven firms, and that stayed fairly steady. But then look at the blue firm, the blue bar, the lighter blue bar, which captures SCD minority spend. It's almost negligible in 2016 at 3%, 3% in 2017. It jumps up to 29%, and we have some reasons why that happened. But then in 2019, when total construction spending increased dramatically, the percentage of MBE SCD spend went down to 3%, which was closer to what it was at the beginning of the period. Again, that's what the data says. What that data confirms, though, is how minority firms in the city might be feeling as a result of this market trend. So they see the businesses, a lot more activity, but not only in real terms did their spending go down, it went down dramatically in percentage terms. And so we suspect that experience is what led to a lot of the angst in the industry and the market, and really needs to be addressed with policy. And if you look at the last bar, that is SCD WBE. And we think that bar is instructive because there's a tendency, and I noticed this many years of working in minority business development, that there's is a us versus them kind of mentality that can take place in minority versus women spend. Like women get the business and minorities aren't. Well, the women's spend is so low, it's almost not, you can't even see it in 2018. So it's not that women were getting business that minorities used to get. Their share was also very small, if not negligible. So next slide, please. So we made a series of recommendations regarding 12 1/4. First, the city of New Haven needs to engage other municipalities in New Haven County to increase opportunities for New Haven-based SCD firms. As we said earlier, the SCD program, because of the legal history of the SCD program, is a county-based program. It is and it is also a non-racial ethnic-based program. But right now, the program, while it primarily is benefiting New Haven-based companies, it is open to companies outside of New Haven. But those New Haven-based companies don't have similar opportunities to grow their businesses in the surrounding towns that those surrounding towns' businesses have with New Haven. So this is an issue of fairness of having a two-way street here where New Haven firms have opportunities outside of New Haven. And so we believe that this is an opportunity for the city of New Haven to get to the table, the other leaders around the county, to say that this is a county-based program. If we grow it, everybody has an opportunity to grow, and not just firms outside of the county, outside of the city, that are taking advantage of opportunities in New Haven. Secondly, the city of New Haven needs to enhance its SCD training and development program, focusing on leadership, strategy, bidding, and back office operations. We know that there's some training that has taken place over the years for SCD programs, and I know in my history with MBEs and WBEs is that they sometimes reel at the policy of, okay, more training. And you say, well, we don't need more training. We need more business. And both are true. You need more training and you need more business. And so even Fortune 500 companies, their executives go back for training every now and then. And executives at every company benefit from training. So we believe that there's some needs that can be met on the local level to improve the performance of SCD firms. And that's one of our recommendations. Next slide, please. So similar to what Dr. James talked about with 12 1/2, we found that the data had some significant holes in it. So the data that we had from 12 1/4 and the SCD program captured contracts between the city and the SCD firms directly. They did not capture subcontracts between SCD firms and other SCD firms, subcontracts between SCD firms and other minority firms, or subcontracts between SCD firms and majority firms. So this is a snapshot of the relationship between SCD firms and the city, but it does not capture all of the activity that's taking place behind the curtain. We need to capture that data. To capture that data, the SCD needs to have some staff. And it's not just bean counting. This is important information because if the opportunities are there at the subcontract level, we need to understand what those subcontracts are, who's getting them, why they're getting them, and how we can grow that part of the business. We also felt that the city of New Haven can do a better job at promoting opportunities for SCD firms. For example, trade fairs, connecting successful prime contractors with SCD firms. We heard numerous times talking to numerous different types of stakeholders, whether they be unions, whether they be small contractors, whether they be large contractors, that the construction industry is a relationship-based industry. If you don't have relationships, you're not going to get the work. And so we believe that we can strengthen these relationships within the SCD community, but more importantly, between the SCD community and the non-SCD construction companies and other owners, quite frankly, other than the city. And so if we took a real proactive approach to build those relationships, to promote the successes of the SCD program, we believe that this program can grow dramatically. Next slide, please. And similar to 12 and a half, and when it comes to enforcement, you know, if nobody is watching, if nobody is punished for bad behavior, they will continue that bad behavior. Now, we didn't find any bad behavior, but we think that the city is vulnerable to that bad behavior. And so the city needs to have greater enforcement on existing sanctions on firms not in compliance. The city needs to strengthen the procedures and resources needed to systematically collect data. Okay, again, we need data. And finally, the city needs more transparent public communication of procedures used to enforce the ordinance. You know, this was a process that we learned a lot, but I think the biggest takeaway that I had from doing the analysis, the research, the speaking with the stakeholders is that New Haven can do better. It can do significantly better in terms of contracting and developing SCD firms in the city. And this is important, connecting these ordinances in ways that benefit both. So the SCD firms also have a problem identifying and contract and working and finding talented minority workers. We need to solve both of these problems. It's not an either or. So I think it was wise of the city to put these two ordinances together and this two scope of works together to look at both. So next slide. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, professors. So just to remind everyone of where we are in the agenda, I'm now going to invite any members of this committee to, if they have any reactions or thoughts they would like to share coming off of that, certainly not required, but if anybody does, they are welcome to. After that, I will invite my colleagues on the Board of Alders who are in attendance to do the same. I would encourage, and I'll encourage this to the public as well, because they're coming up next, but I would encourage folks, if they have comments, to be, you know, succinct, because we have been a task force that's been at work for some time. And I think it's really important to make sure we have time and space for public comment tonight as well. But if anybody on the task force would like to give any comment coming off of that, now would be the time. I recognize Alderman Morrison.
Thank you, Alder Decker. I just want to say thank you to our consultants. You know, they always say if it's not written, it didn't happen, right? If you don't have the data, it's not, you don't feel anything. But what you've done for us tonight was start that roadmap of being able to track what really is happening with the with our Black and minority contractors. And so the one thing that I want to say is with your recommendations, all your recommendations basically, not all of them, but most of them surround the need for resources, right? And when I say resources, I'm talking about funding. And so what I want to say to the public is that we have a up and coming budget hearing. Our budget process is going to start in March, and it'll go from March until May. And there'll be at least 2 to 3 public hearings. And we need to hear from the public. If the things that Dr. McKinney and Dr. Jays talked about tonight, if you are really serious about us as legislators really putting some real meat, some real seasoning to the meat, I should say, around the things that has been presented tonight, the alders need to hear from you. We need to hear from you. And so I like all the recommendations and I wish we can do all of them. But this is one of those things that you take one bite at a time at the apple, and eventually you'll eat the whole thing. And so my request, my challenge, my beg to the community is that you come out to our budget hearings, you come to the public forums, and you make sure that the alders hear you in regards to priorities. Because as we all know, our budget is not the happiest scene in the world, but it's all about priorities. And if you make this a priority, as a member of the Board of Alders and my other colleagues that will sit before you, that are sitting before you, they'll make it a priority. So thank you, Alder Decker.
Thank you, Alderman Morrison. Any other members of the task force wish to give comment at this time? You can either raise your hand, on your camera, or else virtually. Angel, I recognize you.
Thank you, Alder Decker. What I'd like to say is that while I don't necessarily agree with every point that was made by the consultants, whom I respect very much, I should say, from the get-go, known Dr. Fred for years, and when Dr. Janes mentioned serving on a development task force, mayor's task force, I think that was under Mayor Daniels, was that not, Dr. Janes?
Yes, that was.
Right, and so I served with you, believe it or not. So that says how old I am, and you look younger. So, but I would say that for all of us, speaking as a man of color, given what has occurred in this country in the last year plus, that we truly do need to look at what our priorities are as a city. We may think that we can't make a difference nationally, and that might be true. But the only way we're going to rebuild democracy, the only way we're going to establish equity, the only way that we're going to establish any kind of a world that's better for our children is if we start at home. And part of starting at home means reevaluating our values and saying that maybe budgets reflect values. And maybe, and I'm not saying this just because I run one of those understaffed and underfunded departments, I mean this genuinely. We need to reevaluate our priorities and then figure out where we really want our money to go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other members of the task force who wish to give comment at this time? Shafiq, I recognize you.
Good evening, everybody, and good evening to all those who are on the call. We've been working at this for a while, and some of you on this Zoom have actually been in this industry or doing this longer than I have. I've been doing it for about 13 years. And many people on the call, my fellow contractors, many of you, this is what you have done to feed your family for a lifetime. And what I want to say is, I commend the work that has been done. I commend Alderwoman Jeanette Morrison for her fortitude taking up this challenge. I mean, me and you have had personal conversations about the struggle around it, and Alder Decker for sticking to the task. But, I said this before, and I'm just going to say it again. Our ability to infuse money into New Haven's most vulnerable communities, Black, Hispanic, Latino communities, where this ordinance falls to benefit the economics of Black, Hispanic, and Latino communities. We know what has happened in the past. We have some data related to it. We have some feelings related to it. But if we do not fix this now, if we do not prioritize this now, as I said on previous calls, this will remain an economic injustice to all citizens in New Haven, because it will continuously throw off the inequalities that are related to economics and people's rightful place in this city to have the opportunity to feed themselves and their family and not be in survival mode. So I'm going to make a personal commitment so there is no misunderstanding about where I'm coming from. And I'm going to personally commit myself to continuing on with making sure that this is done, whether it's outside the task force, whether the task force continues. Since I've been a contractor, this has been something that's been very close to me and dear to me. And, you know, the program needs to be fixed. And we need to do whatever we need to do to shore it up, to fix it out, whatever it is. I think that, you know, some of the feedback we're going to hear, what I've certainly heard from people can no longer wait. And in a city with 6 homicides, and it is not even Valentine's Day, I'm anxious, I'm not sleeping. We need to provide job opportunities and clear visionary future for the community. And that does not, you know, need to fall on the heads of one person. It falls on us as a community. So I'm here to work. I will continue to be a good soldier. I will continue to be a helper, a researcher, whatever needs to be done. But I am urging us on this call. And I am pleading with the alders to please prioritize this and take up proper measures to make sure that this program and these 2 laws are properly executed on behalf of the citizens of New Haven. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafiq. And I will, at the end, I will also just say a brief word about next steps, because, you know, as you're saying with such passion, you know, this really is not the end of our work tonight. This is really the beginning. So are there other members of the task force before I move on to the alders?
Just briefly, Alder Decker, Alder Morrison, everyone on the committee, and for those on the call, a note of appreciation for the extra effort that's gone through this process. These are very constructive recommendations and next steps for us to act on. I think as we did top level slides today, and you know, one of the things we'll be talking to Dr. McKinney and Dr. James, the entire team, about going forward, as well as understanding, figuring out, you know, not just adding staff or adding resources, but deploying it the right way to make sure that we have impact. And then to Alder Morrison's point about the process, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's work that's done behind these construction projects that truly makes New Haven a very special place. The commitment to keeping our physical infrastructure, the parks, playgrounds, streets, roadways of the city, you know, in a place of not only state of good repair, but truly sets us apart from other places in terms of economic growth and well-being for our community. It's very, very meaningful work that our contractors do. So we owe it to have the best training and the resources so that it's built by New Haveners. So I would ask, when we go through budget process, or just generally, we also maintain that perspective on growth, that we actually do invest in the physical plant of the city so that we have a great pipeline of work. I meant to mention it earlier, and I regret that I didn't. Dr. McKinney as well, with 12 1/4, we also monitor many of those private jobs, right? So if it has a public component, a development agreement or something. So we have to make sure we're right-sized as well on the enforcement and monitoring. You know, we did something like 2 million and change for the Hilda Downtown phase projects. So there's quite a bit of effort that goes into that in addition to the city spend. And I'd welcome and listen to comments from people in the community that are on the call today, just to make sure that we fit all of those different pieces.
Thanks, Mike. I see Giovanni. I recognize you, sir.
Yeah, I just want to take 10 seconds here because I want to thank everyone who attended here today. Really looking forward to hearing from you. I don't want to take time from the public comments. I just want to say that I look forward to working as hard as I can to work together with everyone here towards a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If that is all from our task force for now, in addition to the alders who I recognized earlier, I see we have also been joined by Alder Brian Wingate and Alder President Taisha Walker-Myers. And so I would now like to invite any alders in attendance who would like to give comment. Now would be the time. Please use the raise hand function in your Zoom so we can see you. That is, you know, not a requirement, but if any of y'all have anything that you would like to add. I see Alder Walker-Myers and Alder Winter, so Mr. Lucas will bring them in one at a time. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the whole committee and to the consultants for their excellent presentation, for all the work that's gone into this so far. I agree with everything that's been said, that it's so critical that we get this right now. And I think that, you know, the events of the last year have shown us how deep the inequities run in all facets of our society, and how interconnected all of these issues are. You know, when we talk about affordable housing, we talk about public health, the bedrock underneath all of that is economic opportunity and economic access. So I really do share the desire to see this work through, and was wondering if we could get more specifics about the data related issues, both what would be involved in improving data collection, and then how that data becomes accessible to the city for enforcement, to the public for public accountability and interest. So that would be a real concern for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Fred, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Alder Winter, for your question. I'll give you one example of a data-related issue and a quality of data issue. I mentioned about subcontract data. There's also in the provision already an ability for New Haven to provide a price preference for targeted firms in the SCD program. Well, we would like to know, have any of those preferences actually ever been implemented? So if you have multiple bidders on a project, and you had a non-SCD firm, a non-New Haven-based firm win that project, but you have an SCD firm, a New Haven firm, not win the project, but they were within the preference price, and they didn't get it. Why didn't they get it? We don't know if that's happening or not happening. But that's a way to, that's easy money on the table, where you can imagine of how frustrating it might be for a New Haven-based contractor who really should win the contract, but don't win the contract. They're not the lowest bidder, but because they're SCD and they're targeted, they should have won the contract. But they didn't. We don't know whether or not this part of the law is being enforced. So that requires somebody watching.
What that requires is that when someone like us comes in, there should be an electronic file which would have showed us for all the contracts over the last several years, what the bids were for them, who got the contract. That would allow us to answer the question that Dr. McKinney just mentioned. In terms of resources, what it really amounts to is there has to be a person or people who have a primary responsibility for collecting this data and getting it onto an electronic system so that it is safe, kept, and easily accessible by not simply every so many 10 years or whatever it might be when you bring a consultant in or someone has to do an audit, but by the people whose job it is to enforce these ordinances.
So is currently the data, it's kept on paper and you're reviewing paper reports, or what is the current status of the data?
Well, let me tell you, the current status of the data is we're not even sure it exists for some of these things.
for the SCD data, we relied on, and Lil Snyder was been very supportive of all of our requests to provide us with information that she maintains on the SCD program, which includes total spending by the city of New Haven. So we have that, and that comes in an Excel format. But to give you another example of the power of data, that if you don't have it, you don't have that power of the data. So it really, think about proactively. What if at quarterly or at least annually, the SCD firms were brought in to say, and I don't know if they do this, this is the city's capital budget plan for the next 2 years. These are the things that we are going to be purchasing. This is who won these contracts in the past. We want you guys to be more successful. So let's get a plan together to win these contracts. So that kind of aggressive, proactive mentality is what we found is missing, but that's also data related. That needs to be supported by the data.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, if I could ask one more question just about what the priorities are for training. I know there's a lot of mention of training, and some of it seemed to be related to back office, but if the city could do one thing in terms of improving training, what would a top priority be? Thank you so much.
Well, for the small firms and minority contractors, I would say that there would be two components based on the conversations that we had with various people, some of whom were minority contractors, some were union representatives, and others were larger firms. So this is pretty much across the board. Generally, there has to be more training on how to bid successfully. See, there's a difference between how to bid and how to bid successfully. And then secondly, basically financial control, which is connected to your bid. Financial maintenance, that's what was meant in the recommendation that said back office structures. So the small firms, we all know that they have to be jacks of all trades, and they don't have time to do everything on a daily basis like a large firm may have someone who's dedicated to making sure that they know all the available bids that are going on right now that they might be responsible for, and who are able to keep records, and they know, well, the last time we bid this is what it cost us, so we can do the following kinds of things. These small firms are going to need to learn these kinds of things. Do small firms understand that if they win a bid, or even if they win a subcontracting bid, but it turns out that, can I do this job? I'm short on cash. Well, if I actually have a bid, maybe I haven't had a good relationship with lenders, but when I can take the contract into the bank, maybe I can now get loans. Whole new frontier that small firms have to be made aware of. And this isn't simply New Haven. We talk to firms and smaller firms and business contracting across the country. And this is a problem across the country. But that's just an example. That's just a perfect example. They were turned down 3 times for loans, so now they never go back again. But they also never showed up in front of a loan officer with the proper paperwork and arguments as to why I deserve to get this loan from you, and I'm a good risk.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Winter. I see President Walker Myers has joined us in the panel. So I will recognize Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, but I do have a statement. First, I want to thank the task force and the consultants on the work that you have performed. I just want to say that it seems to me that we understand what the problem is, and it's just going to take all of us to be committed to doing the work, right? We've seen this time and time again with different things in a city. We have a real issue in this city with poverty. And in order to correct that, we have to do a whole bunch of different things, right? We're talking about really changing people's lives. We've always been a board since 2011 that cared about jobs. This is just another part of our legislative agenda. And I think we have to actually hold each other accountable to actually getting it done. The roadmap is laid out. We residents and everybody to be committed to holding each other accountable to make sure that we change what's going on with our minority contractors. And I kind of just want to say that because I've been in this position before with New Haven Works, you know, and figuring out a lot of different things about how we actually get people where they need to be. And it's not easy, but it definitely takes commitment. And if we're committing to each other, we have to hold each other accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, President Walker Myers, for that powerful statement. I see that Alder Smith has her hand raised in the panel. Here she comes. Alder Smith, if you're here, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to the task force for this presentation. I truly believe that when a person works in the city, they care more about how the city looks. And we definitely know there has been not an even portion of minority contractors being on any of the city jobs at all. And I think it would be fair to say that we have to include more of our city residents on these jobs working because they could never display their talent if they never had the chance or opportunity. They could never gain wealth if you never gave them the chance. And I think it was like a great presentation that this task force had brought forth. And I'm looking to see what the outcome is going to be with this. I'm for these minority contractors and WBEs working on city projects. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, task force, for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Alder Smith, and I'm sure that as this process moves forward, you know, we on the board will be grateful for your experience and expertise here. So thank you. I see in the Q&A that Alder Wingate has been asked to be let in, so I imagine that means that he would like to give a statement as well. So I think he's coming in. Here he is, Alder Wingate. If you're with us, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Alder Decker. I said let me in because that's how the small businesses, minority small businesses feel. Let me in. That's how they feel. They want that opportunity. Let me in. You know, my Madam President been saying this. We've been running this race for a long time. And we get to these crossroads and nothing, to me, materialize that benefits the small businesses. So I'm saying tonight, thank you for the task force. Thank you for all your data. Thank you for your due diligence. But the truth of the matter is now. It's now that we have to make these changes. I respect what Madam Pro Tem said about the budget and all of that, but sometimes the budget has to lean towards us. So, you know, I'm just saying thank you for all that you've been doing. Thank you so much for the task force, but truly let us in. It's time. It's time that we make those changes. It's time that we make those data changes to see who bid it, when they didn't bid, how they bid it, giving us resources to learn how to bid better, right? So, you know, that's my thing. You know, let us in. And I'm quite sure you'll see the future will be brighter. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Wingate. Thank you for your leadership as well. So I will say at the end of the public testimony, I will just give a brief word about what I think some of the next steps for the Board of Alders and this group are. pursuant to what my colleagues have just said. But I'd like to open it up to the public now. So the way that this is going to work is, this is not a meeting of the Board of Alders, but we're going to proceed the way that we do with public hearings, simply because it's I think, the most fair way for everyone to get their say. So if you would like to be heard on this really important matter, please, you should see in your Zoom a button that says raise hand. And I see that several members of the public have already put those hands up. So we'll go one at a time. I will make the same request of the public that I made to members of this task force to please be as succinct as you can. But, I understand, of course, that this is a really important issue and people's livelihoods are at stake. And so I'm not going to impose a formal time limit, but just out of respect for, the 30 plus people in attendance who might want to speak, I'm just going to ask people to, be as succinct as possible with their points. If I reserve the right as chair to politely request that you start wrapping up your remarks at some point, but I don't know that we'll need to get to that. But so without further ado, we'll hear our first member of the public, who I see Mr. Sean Reeves. Mr. One is in the room. So Mr. Reeves, you have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you guys for all of your hard work and due diligence. Me personally, I am a certified carpenter now, probably about 15 years. I don't really practice the trade, but when I came into the trade, there was this 25% stigma for carpenters on most of these public jobs. We would come in for a job that might last 4 years. We will be entitled to be on that job 1 out of those 4 years for hours wise, just a bare 25%, right? It does nothing for a man's morale as to keeping or being able to take care of his family continuously. You're on these jobs for a minute, then you're laid off. You don't know when you're going to get a next job, but you're watching the same company that you started the job with continue pushing on for another 3 consecutive years. It's almost like a slap in the face, right? We have these ordinances and these policies where our contractors are only entitled to a certain amount of these jobs. And we took this Q House job. It was supposed to be something, for the community to gain a sense of economic development, and it turned into just the same song and dance. Yeah, we might have a higher number on this particular job only because it had so much publicity about it. But 10 years ago, we've been talking about all of these school project jobs and all of these inner city jobs, and all of the data that you guys have collected have led to the same conclusion. 10 years ago, if we would have paid attention, we would have seen the same things. 5 years ago, we would have seen the same things. It's been 20 long years and some change. How do we address this? We first have to look at the whole picture. Is it designed for minority contractors to stand a fair shot? If we're not talking 50-50, then we are not even talking reasonable business. You can't have a whole pie and give somebody 20%, and then out of that 20 or 25%, you slice 14% to a whole nother section of white women-owned contractors. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We would never stand any chance of survival in that type of environment. What do? You have to tear that whole system down and start something fresh that includes a level playing field for all contractors. Yes, as minorities, we have some work to do, but due to systemic racism, those are the reasons why we can't get the bank loans. Those are the reasons why we can't get the bonding necessary to take these jobs. So it's not just about this particular one thing. It's a big thing, but this policy needs to change. The whole entire thing needs to be revamped. If you're not talking 50-50 business, then you're not talking a fair deal to me, anyone that looks like me, or any minority for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves, for your testimony. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. Al, who's next?
All right, give me 1 second. Go.
There's a few hands raised, so everybody who currently has their hand raised will get their turn. And if you would like to be on the list of people to speak, please get your virtual hand up. I see Mr. Carter has joined us. So Mr. Carter, yes, there you are. You have the floor.
Yes, good evening, everyone. How's my audio? Great, I appreciate it. I'd like to start off with the connecting of everyone to this scenario. I'm a business owner, I'm a landlord. So when taxes go up as a landlord, I increase my rent and I gotta find another way to also create more money so that I can take care of my obligation. As a business owner, I'm taxed. Property is taxed, my equipment is taxed, my labor is taxed, and all those taxes go into my service. My customers then pay that price of those taxes. So my tenants indirectly pay taxes on my property. My customers indirectly pay taxes for my service. We're all in this together. What I would like to say is this: even though we're all in this together, some of us are positioned to fail. That's the equity crisis. There's systemic things that created that equity, the inequity. There's personal things, but I could tell you the exacerbation is the systemic portion. There was a Forbes report that was released last year during the Black Lives Matter rally. And this is about June or July. You could Google the source, but it says due to racism, the GDP is constrained. We have to understand. The question to our problems here is addressing the racism. It's addressing the portion of social society that says you're not equal to me, you're less than to me. Because there's things that go beyond this. It goes beyond to the context, which also goes back to how property was transferred to historic levels, where land was purchased for materials of beads, not money from the Native Americans. But even to this day, where home values of Black America, they're valued less than. So which means if we were to even use collateral, we're already coming in still less than our counterparts. But still, again, what's at hand is the position to fail. The solution part of that is public money. Again, I already gave you examples of how we're all in this together through public money, taxation, right? But public money is really, it's a leveraging tool. That leveraging tool is to get us into the private market, because the difference between the two markets is private is where there's plenty, it's more opportunity. Private markets is less restriction. Public, we're restricted. Listen to what's going on, legislation, rules. But what I can tell you is this: our legislation piece, it has to put us in a way where it addresses the inequity. So in this consultation piece, it discusses that there's not a two-way street with the New Haven system, but the county itself is able to still benefit. That right there, that's the systemic racism. That right there is the example. That example there goes across this country. But again, when we do these presentations, include context, because the context also tells you why the demographics, the percentages matter. What I will also want to talk about is the legislation piece, the creativity that exists. You have the ability through legislation to create opportunity where private and public can come together in partnership. We also have to look at those options, because again, knowing that public money is limited, it has a finite amount, where public money does not. Legislation can also welcome in an environment where public and private could come together to expand the reach of that public money, because the inequity has to be met. So when we're talking about resources, let's understand that when we talk about construction, I've seen it for the city where alders take trips to the League of Cities and they come back with the bag of nonprofit money. They come back with CBG money, right? The block money. But again, where's our direct pipeline to the Congressional Black Caucus? Because what time is another variable to this. Already, Black America is now in the third row when it comes on the population count. Because already Hispanics are number 2. And let's just be honest, if we weren't winning in the number 2 spot, how will life look being in the 3rd spot? So we have to really focus on what Angel said, which was start at home. Because in New Haven, we're demanding the state, we're demanding the federal government, and we have to do a little bit better with demanding, with understanding one man, one vote is a part of that demand. But we have to focus on in home. Watching Westville get a lot of resources this year, or let's say 2020, this fiscal budget. But how many people of color, how many people from New Haven were actually on those contracts, doing those roads, doing those sidewalks, and the other services that was given? Again, public money has to address this issue. And please look into the work of the late Whitney Young. When I talk about public-private collaborations, look into the work of Leon Sullivan when I talk about public-private relationships, because without those men, Henry Ford was not going to hire people of color. Look, the story is there. Let's get it done, community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Next up, I see Mr. Rodney Williams in the room. Mr. Williams, once you're ready, you have the floor. Mr. Williams, you're with us there. Here you go. Yep, we hear you. Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, well, basically, first of all, I like to say I appreciate the fact that you guys took the time to do some of the research that you just did. I never really got a chance to speak to Dr. McKinney, but I would tell you this: a lot of contractors that's on this call right now, we've been fighting for this for years. When you look at the Black contractors in the city of New Haven, I think right now it's a 3-card Monte game going on, and they trying to figure out how to hide the Black card from us. Most of the New Haven people that's up there that work for the city, I've been on task force with them. We talked about information. A lot of the information we talked about, y'all not even talking about right now. This has been going on in this city for a long time. This program has been doing what it's been doing for a long time. And what it's been doing is taking care of people in the suburbs with taxpayers' dollars from the city of New Haven. And that's wrong. It's wrong. I just feel like this. I think the contractors need to just stop looking for help, and we need to start helping ourselves. So tonight, I'm gonna tell you this. Me, my companies, we're gonna put up $2,000 our money, and I feel like we need to get representation for the Black minority contractors in the city of New Haven, and we need to get the same information y'all got. And when we need to look at, are we really being treated fair? And we need to look at this too, because there's some things that you guys are hiding. You put the right people on the task force, so the right information don't come out. You thank everybody except for the people who really started it, because you're talking about thinking Paul Bash, you're talking about thinking Juan Castile, but no disrespect, they was with me. They came on board because I gave them information. So here's what I'm gonna say to the contractors on this Zoom: do me a favor. Tomorrow, let's get together. Let's put our own money together. Let's get our own consultant and find out what's really going on in the city of New Haven, because we've been getting screwed for years, and it's time to stop that. I'm not gonna take up too much of your time, but I appreciate you guys going down the path you're going, but I think that this need to be 2 rails. Y'all run down the rail you run down, and let us run down our rail too with our own money, because if we don't invest our own money in this, we never ain't gonna get nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And I'm sure that no one on this task force doubts your commitment to driving this forward. And I do thank you in general for your advocacy around this issue. Who else from the public is here to testify? I see Sadie Marshall. Ms. Marshall, if you are with us, you have the floor.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can. Go right ahead.
Okay, good. Sorry, I don't really want to be on camera. So I fully agree with Mr. Williams that we should get together. Now, I'm a white woman and I am a general contractor. And I am also feeling, you know, a lot of what's going on about not being able to get certain jobs. I don't feel that the bonfire portal is very user friendly. I personally don't have lots of money to hire many people to work for me, to sit there for hours and hours and, you know, upload whatever documents are needed for that. When I look at it, it's like a headache to me. And I don't even try, to be honest, because I'm doing all the administrative work myself for my business. And if I'm going to spend hours and days on end just trying to bid for one job that I may or may not even get, to me, that's just crazy. And I fully support everybody, all the minority people, all Black and brown people that are in this situation. And I want to, you know, offer my support in any type of way, as well as, you know, in my own experience, you know, Lil and Amoy are wonderful. I don't want to take away from that at all, but I do think that there needs to be immediate change. I think that instead of the powers to be always running the situation, they need to let us as the contractors run the show and you know, have our voices heard. You know, with all due respect, I fully respect all of the time and effort that you very intelligent you know, gentlemen have put in, and ladies, don't let me forget anybody, have put into the research to this. But, you know, we took almost, I don't know how many minutes just talking about everybody's credentials. And, you know, we should have gotten really quickly to the meat of what we needed to talk about here. And, you know, and don't get me wrong, I am so impressed with, you know, everyone's credentials. Don't get me wrong, but I think we could have spent more time, especially, you know, having the contractors on the Zoom so I could see their faces, you know, while we're sitting here waiting. And we're just, you know, I always feel like we're just the little guys, and, you know, you know, the alders and, you know, you guys are just like running the show, and then we're allowed to speak. And that should not be like that at all. We should be able to be right at the table from the very beginning, instead of, you know, raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. And that's how I feel, you know. And I would like to say this as well. We do not have a mayor that supports Black and brown people in this community, nor does he support the contractors in this community or women contractors in this community. And we need more support, and we need to vote Mr. Elicker out of office immediately when the next vote comes up, because I myself have even approached him about a situation with waste management that I have proof of and everything, and he is no help to anybody. So how am I supposed to even work and make money within the city if I have a biohazard crime scene cleaning company here, and I do extreme cleaning, and I'm here to clean up the city, and I can't even get help from my mayor? And I have repeatedly written City Hall. There's everybody just keeps turning you into another direction. Well, just go ask them. Go ask them. If I'm a contractor with the city of New Haven, how about putting in a good word for me? How about saying, you know what? Why don't you call Sadie, or making that phone call because you know that connection within the city, and saying, you know what, Sadie's great at this, or, you know, Rodney's great at this, or, you know, whoever. Jaywan's great at this. You know, we need those connections. And I see that happening for people in power helping each other, but not really helping the little guys. And I'm not even gonna say I'm a little guy at all, but I feel like that. I'm made to feel like that. Even when we have contractor, meetings before, which, I was happy to attend, but it always felt like, the big general contractors with a big focus. And we were just like the little fish in the pond. And, when we went there, we're listening to them, tell about all of their big construction thing that's going on. And, at the end, we're just like little fish fighting for a little speck of flakes of food that were thrown into the pond. And it was just like, how about highlighting us and what we do and how fabulous we are with what we do with our businesses. And you let the big guys sit down and watch us so that they can come and fight for a spot to come have my business come and service them, or anybody else's business come and service them. And we need to come together and we need to band together and now more so than any with, any other time with all of these people on the panel so that we can go and demand that the mayor of our city do better for us and that these changes are going to be made place immediately and not yesterday. We need this now. Our businesses are suffering and it's critical that we get the help that we need. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. And thank you for, and thanks to everybody in the audience for, being patient with the format of this town hall. We would like to, in a more ideal world, be able to do something like this in person, which I think would be able to foster, a bit more of that collaborative spirit. But given that we're all trapped in our various offices and living rooms and wherever else, thanks again for continuing to bear with us. I see a couple more hands in the audience now, but I also see we've been joined by Alder Frank Douglas, who is in the room with us. So Alder Douglas, if you have a brief comment to make, you have the floor. You're on mute, sir.
Okay. No, excuse me. No, I'm just along for the ride. I just wanted to hear what was going on, hoping that I could be of some help somewhere along the line. But I commend everybody for bringing this to the table. It's long overdue. We have some very talented contractors in our city, and they're eager to get the jobs done. And we need to give them a chance. They need to get a chance to do this. And I think we should help them in any way that we can. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Douglas. Thanks for joining us. Great. We are now joined in the room by, the screen says HS Drywall. If that person would like to come on camera and give us their name, and then they have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. You have the floor.
Okay, I don't know if you can see me, but one of the problems with the that I noticed from my experience with this 12 1/4 is the good faith effort. That was a loophole for a lot of contractors to say that, okay, we're going to get the minority contractors, we're going to, in good faith, we're going to give them a shot. But they use that as a loophole to oust you out of the opportunity of getting that contract. All right. I experienced that at Science Park. And also the Amistad job. That was a PLA. And, we're working now, and I've been working, but I've been working through word of mouth. I barely got jobs from the city. And when I did, that seemed to be one of the problems, is the good faith effort that's what's that 12 1/4 number 9. So the contractors, hey, there's a qualified contractor or a minority contractor that qualifies to be on that project, they should just let them do that project. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Would you like to give us your name as well?
My name is Darren Smith.
Darren Smith. Thank you, Mr. Smith. We appreciate your coming into the Zoom room today. Thank you. Other members of the public who are here who want to talk on this item. I know I've seen Mr. Walter Esdale's hand go up a couple times and then go back down. So I'm not sure if Mr. Esdale would like to say something. But Mr. Esdale, you're now in the room. So if you would like to give testimony, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I am, believe it or not, I've been putting my hand up for quite a while. Can you hear me?
We can. Go right ahead.
You can't see me though, right?
We did. Oh, there you are. Yeah,
now you
can now.
Okay.
Perfect.
I have so many things to say, and it's because I guess I've listened to about the last 4 or 5 people speak, which they spoke about things that involved me over the years. I'm the managing director for the Contractors Alliance. All the different training programs and training opportunities that might have been mentioned were probably done by the Alliance. We have been here as long as the ordinance. And actually, if you were at the legislative hearing, I made a presentation and I gave testimony speaking to that in terms of what happened over the years and what we've done over the years. Primarily, we've been working on the training for small contractors. And as much as contractors are saying there's no training, we've had training. We've had different types of training that related to what we consider to be issues of concern or issues that we know that people were having trouble with. And we would have a training program to deal with that because all of the interactions that they have with the city, of course, were ones that we would see and be able to deal with. Back when we started this program, I was the development administrator. I was the Mike Piscatelli. And we put this program through as a result of the previous program that was actually created by the consultants that you have right now. And we remade the program with a process where we went and talked with contractors and had to look at the law and how to create a program that would be useful and legal, because the previous program was illegal. We had to drop it. The program we created was a small business program. It's not, unfortunately, what we have called it over the years, but it's a small business program. The idea of the small business program was that an MBE has to be a small business, and we could not call it an MBE program or else it would have been illegal. So we did that with the idea of having a program where we could focus on small contractors getting work. And we decided that at the time, along with the consultants were Mason Tillman, who were one of the largest consulting firms in the country. They've done over 125 disparity studies, and they did ours back in 1999. But the idea of having a subcontractor program was what we decided because of the level of contractors that we had at the time and the type of work that they were doing. So the design of the program really was to provide opportunity that were not out there before. And we had the ability to work with the school program, which was just starting the school construction program. And as a result of that, the school construction program did over $1 billion worth of construction, but we were able to work with them with what we had a sheltered market, basically with the school program, where we had to have 10% of SCDs, and they were called SBI at the time, be on the project. The title name was changed to SCD back in 2010, I guess. But the idea of the shelter program when in the SCD, basically the SCD only exists in the shelter program, which is under $150,000. So that was something where we thought was very important. We reduced the competition for the smaller contractors and had our project managers, our department heads, like Giovanni, he wasn't there at the time, but to have their contracts smaller so that they fell into the shelter market program. And that was very important because there were times when contractors were going for example, sidewalks. And someone mentioned sidewalks before. We have quite a few contractors who are doing sidewalks, but we had them break those down. They were bigger contracts at the time, and we had smaller contractors who didn't have an opportunity to actually do those. So there are a lot of things. Like I said, just too many things that I've had too many years involved with this, I guess, to say that I can make it short. But some of the issues we tried to cover were the idea of being able to monitor them effectively, the enforcement. We had policy that said on all those contracts that we had that were bid out by the city, they had to comply with the 12 1/4 requirement before the contract was signed by the mayor. That was a rule. We still have it. And the idea there was we could see who they were talking about using in their project before we actually created a contract. And I could go on, but I think I would love to have a conversation with some of the people who see the failure of the program. I didn't get an opportunity to talk to the consultants, so my input's not in there. But the issues that I hear coming up could have been dealt with. Shafiq, as I look at Shafiq, I remember Shafiq was a contractor who actually at the time was a woman-owned company when he first started. And we worked under the Winchester, I'm sorry, it was the, not the Winchester, but the, yes. And that was one of his first projects that he had as a company. And so we see that we've had success over the years with people who have come on, been involved, and actually followed us through. He's gone through a lot of the training programs at the time. Same thing with Rodney. Rodney's come to a lot of our training programs. So I'll cut it off, but I just think that the things that I hear would be clarified and we could improve on it if we had a better understanding of what we have here as a project, as an ordinance. And as a result of that, we could clear up some of the understandings that misunderstandings I think that exist, that people have. So I'll cut it there.
Thank you, Mr. Isdale. And thank you for your many years of experience, leading on this issue as well. I don't see any other hands in the attendees list of members of the public who are trying to speak up. I think maybe just one went up briefly. I will ask once more, is there anybody else here from the public who wants to be heard? I'm calling it like a Board of Alders public hearing, even though, as I said, it's not actually that. So I don't see anybody. So I will just then, to wrap up, oh wait, nope, we do have one more person. We have Mr. Larry Stewart. He's put his hand up. So we can invite Mr. Stewart in, and then we'll wrap up. Mr. Stewart, you have the floor. Mr. Stewart, if you're here, please come off mute. You have the floor.
Can you hear me?
We can now. Thank you. Go on ahead.
Okay. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. So the meeting started at 6 o'clock, so we've been here almost 2 hours. And I can appreciate the analytics, even though they were sort of 2 years behind. And what I tend to do when I go into a meeting, because is that I tried to find out what am I getting out of this meeting. I could hear the frustration of the contractors, and I could hear the politicians sort of justifying their reasons for being their reasons for whatever they're doing. One of the things I would like to come out of this meeting is to find out is there a game plan, and how we're going to accomplish this, or how we're going to come up with a solution about how we're going to make this thing happen? Because this seems like it's been going on for 20 years, and we seem to be going round and round and round, and nothing ever seems to come out. I can appreciate Rodney's perspective of like contractors needs to like take the bull by the horn, but we also need, it has to be a collective effort. So is there one thing that we should take away from this meeting, how we can resolve this issue? And I ask that collectively.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I will, or I think any of us could address that when we wrap up in just a minute. But that is where I was going. So thank you. Are there any other members of the public before we wrap up? Seeing none, I will just say then, I will once again thank all the members of the task force for your hard work so far through this process. And as I've said a couple of times tonight, I really do believe, like, you know, this is an important moment in our work, but it is not even close to the end of it, as I think everyone here knows and everyone here has asserted tonight. So I will say, you know, this issue around the situation with minority contractors in New Haven, it's not an issue that going into this task force, I, you know, had particular expertise in. The reason why I'm chairing this task force is because Alder Morrison decided through, there was a bill in the legislation committee that had to do with 12 1/4, and, you know, Alder Morrison and the public just said that this program is not working the way it ought to. And so we set up this task force because I chaired legislation, I chaired it. And I, you know, have learned through this process and, you know, have heard again tonight, of course, that, you know, the ordinance just as it is currently constructed is not doing, you know, what we want it to do. It is not giving Black and Latinx contractors in the city of New Haven the opportunities that they need. As President Walker Myers said earlier this evening, you know, it is also completely core to this Board of Alders legislative agenda and our legislative priorities is good jobs. And so I just wanted to affirm our commitment as the board to actually, like, you know, not just stopping here at a task force, but actually doing the hard work to fix this. And just to give sort of, you know, a little preview of what that process I think is going to look like is our consultants at BJM are hard at work preparing like a formal report based on their conclusions. The Board of Alders will receive that report, and then, you know, from there, I think it'll be our job as the Board of Alders to make the actual changes to legislation that are, you know, gonna start to make progress here. And that's a process that, you know, we, as Alder Morrison was saying at the beginning, really need the public to remain involved in. So, you know, any legislative changes that we're going to propose, there are going to be public hearings, there are going to be opportunities for contractors, for other members of the public, for other experts to be heard loud and clear. And we really need that input. You know, we're going to need it throughout this entire process, but, you know, I just want to signal that, you know, again, our work is not done. And we are committed to actually, as many folks we've heard you tonight say, you know, the time to do the work is now because our communities cannot afford to wait longer. And I hear that and I believe that. And so we are going to work, all of us, not just those of us who are alders, but all of us here on the task force and all of us, I think, here in the room. I know we're going to work to get it done. So I thank you all once again. And if anyone else from the task force would like to give any concluding remarks before I bring this to a close, now would be the time.
Alder Decker, I
see Alder Morrison and then Shafiq. Sorry, I'm just making the queue.
Thank you. Alder Decker, I just have to reiterate, as you said, it's going to take participation of the residents to come to these budget hearings and these committee hearings You know, over the years, we've taken away barriers. Right now, we do everything Zoom, but soon we will be coming back together and holding meetings downtown. One of the big barriers, people say, I don't want to come downtown because I'm going to get a ticket. Well, we got free parking for you. So there's no reason for the community not to make their voices heard, because again, we have one budget, we have dollars, but we have to identify what our priorities are as it relates to these dollars. And if the Board of Alders does not hear the loud cry that surround these topics of many, not 1 to 5 people, of many continuously, then it becomes a read and file. We want to do the work, but you guys have to be the wind beneath our wings. So thank you, Alder Decker.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Shafiq, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. So I think from what I'm hearing, and certainly I have the same sentiment, contractors are looking for something immediate. You know, there's long-term, short-term solutions, and they're looking for, in this environment, as I believe it was Sadie, if I have her name correct, stated, you know, hey, listen, my business is failing. I would need help now. We need help now. You know, one of my immediate recommendations I think we can particularly consider, and Alders can take this back to chambers, is having an oversight committee over the SCD program that might, you know, contain an alder or two, definitely minority business owners, along with maybe a member of Corp Council that can monitor this program and make sure that it is going in a different direction than what many have reported here tonight that has been going on for like 20 years or so. The other thing is too, and I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it here, is, you know, under the Reagan administration, Ronald Reagan actually took things out of government and put it in the hands of private sector, because he realized that private sector sometimes is more equipped, they have the better resources and the time to handle those issues. The SCD program has been given a task to say, hey, listen, develop these minority programs. And it's been 20 years. According to the reports that people are here saying, it's been 20 years. So, you know, maybe it's time to put together an RFP, put together an RFQ, send it out, do a pilot program, find a large or major contractor and say, listen, here's $500,000. We need you to take 10 minority companies, 5 of them we need to get to $500,000 in 1 year, and these others, because they're already making $150,000 a year, we need you to move them as close to $1 million as possible. Here's $500,000. If this goes well, it will be an ongoing process. I think that competition, we live in a capitalistic democracy, and we know that competition is what drives our industries. It's driving the vaccine industry. Who can get the vaccine out first, right? This drives other industries. So I think we need to move it now to a driving the industry. I mean, we have to look at the resources that we're putting in, all of the resources to develop minority contractors. And we can't look at it no more as it's been 20 years, it's been 30 years, it's been 5. We have to look at what are we spending to achieve this task? What are we allotting? What goes into that process? If we're spending $500,000 a year, I don't know what the number is, I haven't looked at the budget, to say that we're going to produce these contractors and create this economic growth, but after a period of time, millions and millions of dollars are not passing through the hands of these contractors, not flowing through the city, but yet we're still putting this money into this program and these resources. We're not getting even back what we anticipate from what we're putting in. So, you know, this is nothing to take away from anybody's effort or even indicate that anybody that's involved in this process is not doing a good job or not being effective. Times change. Businesses change. Business is based on consumer spending and consumer habits. Now we know it's based on pandemics. And this is an economy, and businesses have to keep time with it. So I think these are two like real immediate things. I think that looking at moving this program into a pilot program setting, I will rest assured, I stake my reputation on it, that if you paid a company $500,000 and told them, take 5 minority companies, Black, Hispanic, Latino, women, take 5 more, move 5 of them, try to get them to $500,000. Maybe you're making right now $100,000 gross, and maybe the ones that are making $150,000 gross, can you move them or help them get to $1 million in 1 year, and then we do it again? I rest assured, money talks. You know, Nino Brown said it in New Jack City. He wasn't a philosopher, but he said money talks. And I believe that money will become an inspiration to pay the resources to real top grade companies out there that do this work to get us a starting point. That'll get us a starting point. And then we can work on the long-term stuff down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final concluding remarks before we wrap up this meeting, but not our work? Seeing none from the task force, I thank you all again very much for your hard work over the past weeks and months. And tonight, I will thank again members of the public and my fellow alders. And let's roll up our sleeves and let's make some improvements, and let's do it soon. Good night, everyone.